Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom today, the 16th day of the month of Kislev of the year 5778, corresponding to the 4th of December of the year 2017. And with thanks to God, I am feeling considerably better than I was even yesterday, and a lot better than I was last week. So Baruch Hashem, I do hope today to return to our course of study, certainly with our study of the laws of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet and our study of Shir HaShirim. You will permit me to decide as we advance in today's shiurim as to whether we'll also go today into the Likutei Moharan or not. I do apologize for the interruptions in transmission that were experienced yesterday, and I've not been able to contact yet support for our various programs, but owing to its having been the weekend in North America where our providers are located, but I do hope to try to get a handle on what's been going on. We do seem to have been broadcasting successfully in the past without these interruptions, and I do wonder whether it might have been some congestion on the internet yesterday that caused the interruptions we experienced. In any event, my dear friends, without further ado, let us now advance to our studies for today of the Aleph Bet. And now we come to the letter Ayin, the Hebrew letter Ayin. Shalom today, the 16th day of the month of Kislev of the year 5778, corresponding to the 4th of December of the year 2017. And in our studies of Mishnat Sofrim by Rabbi Yisrael Kagan, the Chafetz Chaim on the forms of the letters as written in the Sefer Torah, the Tefillin and the Mezuzah, we come today to our study of the letter Ayin. And before we come into the actual laws as they are brought down in the Mishnat Sofrim, let us first consider, as it were, from the outside, the form of the letter Ayin and the various components that make it up. The letter Ayin here in the center really consists of two main parts. The part on the right is really an extended vav, somewhat angled and descending below the baseline of the letters of the other letters of Aleph Bet, and stuck onto the Yerech, the thigh, the base of the vav, is the Zayin. So essentially the letter Ayin, which numerically signifies 70, is made up of these two letters, the vav on the one side, the Zayin on the other, attached together here. Although, in fact, as we shall see, the Mishnat Sofrim refers to the head of the Ayin as a Yud. In any event, the right-hand head of the letter is curved. Now, the form of the Ayin that we see pictured here has the letter Zayin perched on the base of the Yud or extended Vav. This is the way that the letters are written in Sefer Torah, Mezuzah, and Tefillin, according to what is known as the Ktav Bet Yosef, used by the Ashkenazim. However, according to the opinion of the Ktav Ari, several of the letters that we shall be studying from now on, and including this Ayin, the form of the form of the left-hand arm is not the form of a Zayin, but it's the form of a Vov. In other words, according to Ktav Ari, the script according to the teachings of Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the outstanding Kabbalist, instead of the squared head of a Zion with its three crowns on the perched on both sides with the neck in the middle, the head of the Zion, according to Ketav Ari, would be the head of a Vov. In other words, with a curved right-hand side extending down, and the head not being perched in the with the neck not being in the middle of the head, with the head protruding on both sides. Well, now the letter Zayin is written at a height of somewhat more than 3 breadths of the nib. The letter Zayin is made up of the regular height of 3 kulamusim, 3 widths of the nib, the heads being 1 width, the legs or arms, call them what you will, are a second nib breadth in width at least, and then the third element, which can be somewhat about 1.5 nib breadths in its width, is going to be the way the leg of the Yud Vav extends downward, angled towards the left, and coming down below the level of the line of the base of the other letters. And so 3.5 kuramasim, 3.5 widths of the nib of the pen. As we've said, the right leg has the form of a Vov with a rounded top right corner. The left leg, according to the script of the Ketav Yosef, has the head of a Ketav Bet Yosef has the head of a Zayin. According to Arizal, it's going to be the head of a Vav. In the head, when it's Ketav Bet Yosef squared Zayin, it's going to have 3 crowns on it. That is to say, the Ayin is one of that group of letters, Shin Ayin Tet Nun Zayin Gimel Tzadi Sha'atnez Getz, that do have the crown and the tagin, and if in Ketav Ari also, where the left head takes the form of a Vav, there's likewise on the Vav the 3 tagin. Now, an important rule that we'll be discussing when we come to the actual laws, as brought down by Chafetz Chaim in Mishnat Sofrim, is that the heads must not touch each other at all. Now, the right-hand head of the Ayin is slightly angled upwards, as opposed to a regular Yud and a Vav that are horizontal. As the Yerech, the leg, extends downwards, it is slanted in this way. The right leg is slanted. It cannot be perpendicular. It has to be angled, and the reason for this angling is so that if another letter is going to be written adjacent to the Ayin, it must be possible to write the letter sufficiently close so that it doesn't appear to be too much of a distance, as if the distance between the 2 letters is the distance between a word. So the Zayin has to be written with the back, as it were, the right hand back angled in this way to make room for the angle of the left hand head in such a way to create sufficient space for the following letter to be written near to the left hand head of the Ayin. Now, the bottom portion, which the 2 legs fit into, the Vav is fitting into this Yerech here from the right-hand side, and the Zayin is fitting here from the left-hand side. This thickens as it is written down, and it protrudes somewhat outwards to show that this is not a letter tet. The form of the letter tet is made up of a chof and a zayin, but it could very easily, with less than careful writing, come that if the ayin did not have the protruding left hand, extending left hand leg, then it might come to be confused with the letter tet. For that reason, it has this protrusion. And likewise, the protrusion does create more room for nearby letters. So with that, let us now turn to the laws of the letter Ayin as brought down by the Chavetz Chaim, by the in the Mishnat Sofrim, on the form of the letter Ayin. He begins, as we've already covered in the overview, the letter Zayin has the form of the first word, the form of the first letter of the two letters of which it's made up should be, he says, like a kind of yud. We see that he does call the head of the ayin a yud, and indeed, if it's seen as a yud, then numerically the value of ayin as a 70 makes more sense, being a multiple of 10 yud times zayin 70. It's somewhat more complex drash if we go by the Ktav Arizal, but Chavetz Chaim does call this a yud. And the face of the yud, as we've said, must be angled slightly upwards from the outset, not horizontal. And the guf, the body of this yud, is now drawn downwards under it, standing up. Now, it must be somewhere between being perpendicular and being absolutely diagonal. It should be standing upright, but somewhat, but not too much, drawn diagonally, because if it's drawn too much on a diagonal, which is going to cause the left leg of the ayin to extend quite far, it will be difficult to position another letter sufficiently close so the head of the adjacent letter will be close to the head of the zayin, so it won't look as if the two letters are separated by a space that should be between two words. So you have to be able to write the ayin in such a way that if there is a letter after it, it's going to be sufficiently able to be written sufficiently close to the ayin, not to be confused with a letter standing at the beginning of the next word. So on this yerech, this extension from the right-hand head, as it extends down, the left-hand head, in the case of the Ktav Bet Yosef, in the form of the Zayin, is standing and touching the Yerech just under half the length of the, below the halfway point of the right-hand Yerech. And here, according to Ktav Bet Yosef, the head of the left letter is that of a zayin with its three crowns. Now, already discussed in the laws of the writing of the letter Aleph is a problem that can occur with a scribe that has a pen, a quill that has perhaps too much ink on it that he's put on the quill, that it could happen that the heads of the Aleph or the heads of the Ayin might touch. The same problem can occur with the head of the letter Tzadik, made up of a kind of Nun and a Yud. It can also occur in the case of the writing of the letter Shin, and the same law applies in all cases, that if the scribe was writing a sefer Torah, and the error of the attached heads was discovered after the writing, he may erase the letter and write it properly in a Sefer Torah. If it's writing tefillin or mezuzah, where each letter has to be written in the order, and you cannot go back once you've written forward, you cannot go back to correct the letter. The laws which are applicable to scribes are somewhat more complex as to when, under which circumstances, is it possible to fix where the heads do attach together. We did look at these laws in relation to the form of the letter Aleph, and we should be coming back to some related issues when we study the form of the letter Shin. So with that, my friends, we conclude our study of the Hebrew letters for today, and I hope that reception has been okay for you today. If there have been any issues, I'd be very grateful if you'd let me know. And besides that, we will now take just a brief interval, and then we should be coming to our studies today of Shir HaShirim, with some most beautiful and very fascinating sections of this amazing work in our studies coming up in just a few minutes. Shalom again, my dear friends. Shalom, as we now prepare to begin our study for today of Shir HaShirim. We will be beginning to look into chapter 8 of Shir HaShirim. However, we will also be looking back to chapter 7, the later part of chapter 7, in order to get in context our studies. And as I've already mentioned yesterday, for those who heard it, if it was actually transmitted, since the overall consensus of opinion is that we will, on conclusion of our present circuit of Shir HaShirim, not go back to the beginning and look at Targum and Rashi, but rather that we will go forward to the 12 shorter prophets. In that case, for these very amazing and wonderful redemption-filled sections of the conclusion of Shir HaShirim, we cannot pass them by without enriching our studies of the Metzudat David with references to the commentaries of Rashi and the ancient nearly 2,000-year-old Targum into Aramaic that we have on these sections, as well as some midrashim, in order to just get a glimpse of the profound depth of Shir HaShirim. Shalom. Today, the 6th day. Let's do that again, please. Shalom. Today, the 16th day of the month of Kislev of the year 5778, corresponding to the 4th of December of the year 2017. We come today in our study of Shir HaShirim to the concluding sections at the end of chapter 7 and through chapter 8, as this love song between the Holy One, blessed be He, and His beloved Israel comes to its climax with the many expressions of longing and of love and praise we've had in the previous sections, now rising to a crescendo as Israel stirs for the final redemption. And we've had in the earlier part of chapter 7 the whole praise of the beloved that begins in verse 2, chapter 7, how beautiful are your footsteps and your shoes, daughter of the noble one. And that description of her from bottom to the top. And we've discussed the different views of whether this is said in the name of the lover, the Holy One, blessed be He, or in the name of the nations. And in any event, this evocation of her praises reaches its crescendo in verse 11 of chapter 7, where she says, Ani ledoidi ve'olai teshukosoi, I am my beloved's, and upon me is his desire, which is the expression of the complete love and fidelity between the two of them. And that's when in verse 12, which we shall now pick up from, she says, well, now that I know that our relationship is unique, we are devoted to each other, let's go out to the field. Let's stay out in the Kfarim, the villages. Verse 13 of chapter 7, let's get up to see the orchards and see if the vine has sprouted forth and so on. And all that invitation to love comes forth in verse 14. Well, it's time now with all of these dainties and precious ones to be ready for the feast, for the restoration, for the redemption. Well, now, I'd like today to begin by tracing through the way that the Targum explains these verses, starting from verse 11. Verse 11, I am my beloved's, and upon me is his desire. Targum Yonatan says, this is Yerushalayim, namely Knesset Yisrael. Yerushalayim says, all the time that I am going in the path of the Master of the world, he causes his presence to dwell in my midst, and upon me is his desire. But if there is a time when I turn aside from his path, he lifts up his presence from my midst, and he causes me to wander among the nations, and they are ruling over me just like a man rules over his wife. And then in verse 12, go, my beloved, let's go out to the field and sleep in the villages. Targum says, when the children of the house of Israel sinned, the Lord was revealed to them in the land of Edom. That's the reference of the field of Seir, the field of Edom. And that's when the Knesset Yisrael, Assembly of Israel, says, I entreat you, Master of all the universe, receive my prayer that I'm praying before you, even in the midst of this exile in the provinces of the nations. So here we see how the beloved is beginning to stir to return to her former attachment to her beloved, and Targum expands on this theme in verse 13. Nashkimu lakromim nirem porcho agefen pitach asmoda heneto remonim shometenes dodai, where let's get up to the orchards, let's see if the vine has flowered, if the little clusters of the forming grapes have developed, and the pomegranates have blossomed forth, and there shall I give my love to you. So Targum picks up on the plural form of the verb nashkimo lakaromim. Let us get up early to the vineyards. Targum says it's Amrin b'nei Yisrael ilen le'ilon. It's children of Israel now who are saying one to another, let's get up early in the morning, let's go to the Bet Knishta, the Bet HaKnesset, the house of prayer, or the Bet Midrasho, to the house of the search for the quest for the Torah, the house of study. And there we shall explore the book of the Torah, and we shall see, if we shall study Nevaker, we shall make a study of the book of the Torah, and we shall see if there has arrived the time of redemption of the children of Israel that are compared to a vine. If the time has come for us to be redeemed from their time has come to redeem from their exile, and we shall ask the sages. For it is revealed before the Lord the merit of the righteous, who are filled with fulfillment of commandments, just like a pomegranate filled with seeds. If the time has come to go up to Yerushalayim, and there to give praise to the God of the heavens, and to offer burnt offerings and holy libations. So Targum is picking up the midrashic allusions in this pastoral description of orchards and vineyards as all alluding to the restoration of Israel. And verse 14, Hadudoim enosnu reach al psochenu kol magodim chadoshim gam yishonim dodi tzofanti loch. Verse 14, the spikenards are given their fragrance, and upon our openings are all of these dainties, new and old. These, my beloved, have I treasured up for you, says Targum, verse 14 of chapter 7. And when the desire shall arise, the will shall arise before Hashem to redeem his people from exile, then it shall be said to Malko Mashiach, to King Mashiach, already there is complete the destined time for the ending of the exile, and the merits of the righteous tzaddikim are fragrant in their odor before me like the fragrance of balsam, and the sages of the generation are fixed in the gates of the midrash, the search for the Torah. They are engaged in the words of the books and the oral words of the Torah, and therefore arise and receive the malchut, the kingship that has been treasured up for you. A very significant verse, chapter 7, verse 14. Hadudoim nosnu reach ve'al psochenu kol megodim chadoshim gam yishonim doidi tzofanti loch. Well, it's these three words at the end of the verse that seemingly Targum is picking up on. To my beloved, I have treasured it up for you. Who is doing the talking here? According to Targum, this is the lover Kuchberichu who is talking here, and the doidi here is the Mashiach. That is the way Targum puts it. When the time arises, he says that there is the will arise before God to redeem his people from the exile. Then it shall be said to King Mashiach. According to Targum, this verse is said to Mashiach. The time has come. Hadudoim nochnu reach, the fragrant merits of the tzaddikim are now giving forth their balsam fragrance, and al psochenu kol megodim, at the ptachim, at the gates, the entrances of the Bet Midrash, all of these dainties, chadoshim gam yishanim. This Targum is relating to the newfound absorption of the children of Israel in the words of the Torah with their sages, and for that reason now the time has come for Dodi Tzofanti Loch, take all these dainties that I've hidden away from you. The appointed time has come now. So it's this conclusion of chapter 7, and now moving on to chapter 8, verse 1. Mitenecho ka'achli yonek shtei imi emsoacho v'chutz eshokcho gam lo yuvuzuli. We'd already studied the Metzudat David on this verse when he had explained it as the more simple mashal of the lover and the beloved now becoming reunited, and she would love, as we saw in the session when we studied this verse with the Metzudat David, she, the beloved, now sends her words to say to her lover, yes, indeed, I wish to be completely open with this, to kiss you out in the open, the marketplace, the street, bepumbi, with absolute, in front of everyone. But I'm ashamed lest I will be despised, and that's why she says, I wish that you were like a little brother to me that is still sucking the breasts of my mother, that there's no shame in his older sister kissing him in the streets out of her love. Well, now, when we come to the Targum on this verse, chapter 8 now, verse 1, who will give you like a brother to me, Look at the direction he goes in. At that time, Melech Mashiach shall be revealed to the assembly of Israel. And they will say to him, children of Israel will say to Mashiach, come and be with us like a brother, and we shall go up to Yerushalayim. So here the Targum is picking up that this intimacy between the lover and the beloved exists through the intimacy between Knesset Yisrael and the lover, now represented in the form of Mashiach, who is like a brother attached to us. And let us, says Knesset Yisrael to Mashiach, let us be getting nurture with you from the profound teachings about the deeper meaning of the Torah, just like a suckling babe sucks from the breast of his mother. Because all the time that I was wandering around outside of my land, when I would remember the name of the great God, when I would mention and utter his name, and I would sacrifice my very life in the sanctification of his name and his godliness, when I did that, the nations of the earth would not despise me. In other words, according to Targum, what she is saying here, Targum is saying now on this verse that who would give you like a brother to me, sucking the breasts of my mother. I found you outside, that is to say, outside of Israel. I found you there. Eshokcha, I give you to drink. That's her libation offerings in exile of the sacrifice of life in martyrdom for the sake of his godliness. And when she would do that, ashkechoef, on those occasions when I would give you to drink, and I would kiss you, there was different. I would be intimate with you even outside the land in this martyrdom. Gam lo yavuzuli. They would not despise me. The nations saw and understood the great level of Israel. Continuing now with verse 2 of chapter 8. En hogecho aviacho el besimi tlamdeni ashko miyain horekach me'asis umoini. I shall lead you, I shall bring you to the house of my mother. You teach me. I shall give you to drink from the wine of the spiced wine, and from the juice of my pomegranate. Well, here on this verse, Targum says, I shall lead you, O Melech Mashiach. She's now talking to Mashiach. I shall lead you, and I shall bring you up to my temple, and there you teach me to fear before the Lord God and to go in his ways. And there we shall feast on the banquet of Leviathan, and we shall drink the ancient wine that has been hidden away on its grapes from the very days of the creation of the universe, and from the pomegranates of the fruits that have been destined for the tzaddikim in the Garden of Eden. So we do see very much here not only the promise of future redemption, but the centrality of the figure of Moshiach in this redemption. And I think that this very much relates to the closing chapters of the prophecy of Ezekiel from chapter 40 onwards, where he's depicting the restored Jerusalem. And after explaining the structure of the temple, Ezekiel explains the centrality of the Nasi, the prince, whom Rashi on those chapters says is Melech Moshiach, the absolute centrality of the prince in the temple services and in the leadership of the people. Now going on to verse 3, continuing with these expressions of love between the two of them. His left hand under my head and his right hand embraced and caressed me. So here Targum says as follows on chapter 8 verse 3. It says, Knesset Yisrael, I am the choicest of all of the peoples, because I bind myself with the tefillin on my left arm and upon my head. Smolotachas roishi v'minot chabkeni alludes to the left arm of tefillin and the tefillin of the head. So the tefillin are on my right arm and upon my head, and I place a mezuzah on my right hand of the entry to the house in the upper third towards the roof, and that way there is no permission given to the damaging demons, agents of destruction, to cause any harm to me. In other words, on verse 3, Targum is darshaning as follows. He's saying, Smolo tachas roshi, there's the small and there's the rosh. The small is the tefillin of the arm, the left arm, on which the tefillin are bound by the adult male Israelite, smolo. And tachas roshi, it's under the head. There is, as we know, an intimate connection between the batim, the capsules of the tefillin on the head, and those of the arm, and the small is under the head. The tefillin of the arm is crowned over by the tefillin of the head. V'yaminoi tchapkeni, yaminoi here is referring to the way that we affix the mezuzah on the right-hand side of the doorpost from the point of view of the person entering into the house. That's yamino techapkeni, he's embracing, caressing me. That is to say, the mezuzah is giving me this protection, so I'm protected all around. It's known that these are the three great protections of the Israelite, the tefillin, the mezuzah, and on the days of Shabbat when the tefillin are not worn, and likewise Yom Tov, it is the actual sign of the Yom Tov and the sign of the Shabbat that is the second sign protecting, and then there's the mark of the Milah, the circumcision. So after evoking the uniqueness of Knesset Yisrael, adorned with the signs of God's kingship upon us, the tefillin, that's when she is in an ecstasy, all ready to receive the coming redemption. She's in an ecstasy of passion, and that's when she comes into chapter 8, verse 4, the third time that she makes them swear the oath. Chapter 8, verse 4, Hishbati eschem benos Yerushalayim, ma to'iru u'ma to'iru es o'avo ashtech pots. Once again, the third time she swears the oath, 4 times she addresses them, 3 times not to stir up the love until the time of desire is awakened, and the 4th time when she swore to them, I adjure you, if you find my lover, tell him that I am sick with love. But here, Hishbati Eschem, this third of these almost identical verses, except here we don't have her making them take an oath by the deer of the outside. Here simply, Hishbati Eschem b'not Yerushalayim, I adjure you, daughters of Jerusalem, ma to'iru, why should you stir up? Ma to'iru, why should you arouse the love until it, until there will be the chefetz, the desire, the pleasure of the love between the Holy One and Israel to be stirred by itself. In other words, when God will of his own accord return to Israel. Well, now for the very amazing way in which Targum now interprets this verse. Targum says on chapter 8, verse 4, Yema Malka Mashiach, it's King Mashiach that shall say, Mashbi'a anu aleichin ami beis Yisrael, I adjure you, my people, the house of Israel. This is now, the B'nos Yerushalayim is not in the way we have been understanding it previously as being the other nations, the other maidens. It's now Israel are on their way back, coming back into the land of Israel, back to Jerusalem. You are now the daughters of Jerusalem. I'm adjuring you, my people, the house of Israel, what is this that you are provoking the nations of the earth to go up out of exile? And what is this that you are rebelling against the troops and the forces of Gog and Magog? Isakivu pon ze'er ad yishetzun amamayo de'alu la'agcha krava b'Yerushalayim. Just hold back and wait a little until those nations that have gone up to wage war against Jerusalem shall be destroyed. And then the Master of the universe will remember the compassion, the love of the Tzaddikim, in whose merit he shows compassion to Israel. And then there shall be desire before him to redeem you. A very amazing and surprising direction in which Targum takes this. And let us first of all mention one of the foremost, best known, prominent discussions of these oaths in Shir HaShirim, which are taught in the Talmud to be a series of 3 oaths that the Almighty made Israel swear during the time that they would be in exile, that they would not rebel against the nations. And the foremost exponent of the applicability of these oaths today was in our generations the late Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, Rabbi Yoelish, the Grand Rabbi of Satmar, who passed away in the late 1970s, and who, after surviving the horrors of Auschwitz and coming to the land of Israel, was appalled at the secular direction which the state of Israel was taking in his time, and he protested that while there was no prohibition against living in the land of Israel, it was not permitted for Israel to take the malchut, the kingship and the independent statehood of the land, into their hands until God would deliver the malchut into the hands of Israel under Melech Mashiach. Well, I do not want to get into the political and ideological overtones of this argument, which forms the foundation of the ideology of groups like the Neturei Karta, who are opposed to the existence in our time of a state of Israel. But let us first distinguish, as I've already done, between the actual Malchut, the government in the hands of Israel, as opposed to Yishuv Haaretz, dwelling in the land, even when it's under the government of the nations of the world. Well, having said that, let us also reflect that the Targum was composed in the 2nd century of the Common Era, or the first and 2nd centuries. Yonatan ben Uziel was in the 1st century at a time when the temple had not yet been destroyed, and his Targum is a work of prophecy. Well, now, indeed, the land was under the government of the nations for millennia, from the time of the Roman occupation and government of Judea, which they renamed Palestine, starting in the last century before the Common Era, and advancing very rapidly through 1st century with the destruction of the temple, the year 68 of the Common Era, followed by the increasing oppression in the years 130, the rebellion of Bar Kokhba. And subsequently, the land was subject to disputes with the breakup of the Roman Empire. Persia had a hand here, and there were later the Christian Crusaders and the Muslims all arguing over the land. Well, now, this was long before the initiative took place in 100 years ago through the Balfour Declaration that the nations declared and subsequently passed with the authorization of the United Nations to give over the government of the land to the State of Israel. Well, now, here Targum is saying, do not rebel against the nations of the world. Israel's task is not to be revolutionaries who fight to overthrow existing structures. Rather, the service of Israel, this Targum is suggesting, is to continue with our pursuit of prayer and Torah and the fulfillment of the mitzvot, and the time will come about exactly when God wants it. Well, now, we do not have to take this to the degree to which the Satmar Rebbe and those who are following this similar ways of interpretation in order to accept that indeed the centrality of Israel's service is the Torah and prayer. And also a second thing, that given that Targum was written, like I say, nearly 2,000 years ago, let us reflect that it was some 1,500 years after Targum that it was not simple people and secular Jews that began the Aliyah to Israel, the great Aliyah, which began in the Middle Ages with figures like Nachmanides, Rabbi Nachman ben Moshe, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, the great biblical commentator, and subsequently with the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, the huge upsurge of Aliyah to Israel of great Rabbanim. They were not some kind of secular political Zionists. They were people who were filled with messianic fervor, and particularly in the settlement that was established in the city of Tzfat in the north of Israel, where there was literally a Torah kingdom re-established. And they did not try to wrest control of the government from the ruling Turks at the time, and nor there were rebellions of the Jewish population of Israel who entered the land in increasing numbers in the centuries that followed this. In fact, there was never a Jewish rebellion at all. The whole process was a process that took place with the consent of, the agreement of the nations of the world. So what we need to take out from this is not that we must not defend ourselves in the land of Israel, because the defense of human life is a fundamental principle of the Torah. And nor is there any question that a land needs a government. What we might say is that we should not imagine that the present secular state of Israel is actually already the realization of Mashiach. There's more to come. And we do see the tremendous self-control that is exercised by Israel under the extreme threats with which she's faced constantly, and provocations and attacks, and exercise tremendous restraint in not rebelling against the rule of the nations. It would probably technically be quite feasible to use the kind of weaponry that Israel is supposed to possess to wage a simultaneous war of attack on all fronts around the country, and actually overthrow everything and leave it all a smoking pile of rubble. But Israel does not do that, does not seek to undermine the surrounding peoples or nations, seeks to work with them. And this would indeed be fulfillment of this verse. Well, now, it's here that we shall leave today this look at Shir Hashirim, and God willing continue with the going back over the last verses, looking at them in the light of the Mitzvot David in our next session, as we now advance to the having heard these words between the beloved and the daughters of Jerusalem in chapter 8, verse 4, and or under the interpretation of Targum, words of Mashiach to the people of Israel. We now, from verse 5 onwards, enter the closing exchanges of expressions of love between the two, and her yearning that he will indeed return to her very quickly. And with that, we will conclude our study for today. So with that, my friends, I'm going to entreat your understanding of my need to take things just a little easier for today, and to bring our studies to a conclusion here now without going on to a Likutei Moharan session. I'm deeply grateful that indeed we have been able to connect and have these transmissions today without interruption. And with the help of God, I hope and plan to be back here this coming Thursday, December the 7th, for our studies at 1600 hours Israel time. With that, my dear friends, shalom from the city of Jerusalem, and look forward to our next session. Shalom.